Suge's entourage was constructed of the Blood gang members in Los Angeles. Suge Knight was a very powerful individual, and what made him powerful, he had access to just about the entire Blood gang, and he also had dozens of police officers in his back pocket. He also had a district attorney in his back pocket who was actually handling one of his probation cases. He also he had connections with the Compton mayor, and I have a picture of Suge Knight and Mayor Reardon embracing each other. So he had access also to Maxine Waters, and there's a lot of she's a councilwoman in Los Angeles, and she actually stopped a narcotic federal probe in Texas involving her husband's best friend, and actually stopped midway through the investigation.
Right, but I'm trying to keep it connected to Suge and the death row situation. One of the things, what I said when I started the question was that it seemed like in the book you guys were surprised. And the reason why I'm saying that is because being in the music industry, it was pretty common knowledge that police officers work not just for death row, but they work for a number of artists and institutions and labels, and are often contracted.
Well, it's not illegal to moonlight and work security for a record company. It was only illegal to work for this particular record company.
But the reason why I seemed like I was going, why I was so surprised, because it was kind of chronicled in articles. There's been a few articles where people have gone like, I went to death row, and there were police officers there. You know, Vibe is probably the most.
Right. Hey, the hip hop press produced a lot of this material. No question about it. And an author named Ronan Rowe compiled a lot of it in his book, Have Done Little Travel.
But I mean, when this happened, though, did those raise?
But those cops that they were talking about then, supposedly they were from Inglewood, Compton. They were from these other police departments that. Well, Compton was a totally corrupt police department, but still, even they eventually instituted some controls on death row. But they didn't have a formal policy saying you cannot work for death row records, and if you do, you'll be fired.
So it was just a situation about LAPD couldn't work for them. So let me ask you, Detective Poole, what was so, other than the fact that you had LAPD officers working for death row, how did this connect itself to maybe the Rampart scandal and the possibilities of death row being involved with the killings of Notorious B.I.G.? Did these police officers have any sort of connection? Did they turn a blind eye? Did they have the information? What's the story on that?
Well, over the years since 1995, there's been a series of violent acts that have occurred, and at every turn during the investigation, it was found that officers, not only from LAPD but other agencies, were actually witnesses to these occurrences, and however did not remain at the scene to give their testimony to the case
or intervene.
If they did, they would be fired. And like Randall said earlier, it was a criminal organization. It'd be like officers working for the Gambino family, moonlighting for the Gambino family. That's exactly what was going on. Death Row Records was trafficking narcotics, and there were dozens of Blood gang members who were on parole and who were working alongside these police officers while providing security. So, it was a major conflict of interest and a major officer safety problem. If you can imagine, by day you're working LAPD, busting Blood gang members, and at night you're working alongside them.
Let me ask you this. Again, and I'm not trying to paint a clean picture over this, but what you described, with say somebody like a Suge, having access and all these other things, it doesn't seem that unusual. Again. In the sense that, I mean, that
there's never been a record company president who was, or CEO who was remotely as thuggish as Suge Knight, or as violent as Suge. No, Suge Knight did things. I mean, he wasn't.
Well, now I don't. You cover Rolling Stone, right?
I'm not saying that there were a bunch of other executives at large corporations that funded Death Row that knew what they were doing and passively supported it. I'm not saying that's not true. And those executives were white.
But I mean, the history of the music business. I mean, it's always been a thug type, and we often in the music business. Although at this point in time, some of the old heads that are there now, it's very hard to draw those direct connections.
But, in those days, it was mob money. I mean, sure, the mobs were following money, but they didn't have the. But they didn't
disappear.
They didn't just actually have a mobster running the company. They would at least have a beard of some sort. I mean, Suge Knight was the president of the company, and he was the #1 thug.
Well, I think that would be. Again, if you have a good conversation, and a conversation like on radio, to sit there and go, well, is Tommy Mottola connected to the mob? Tommy that heads Sony, and we can infer things, and we can get back, and I couldn't say it on the air and not avoid being sued by libel, but everybody in the business, but hold on a second, everybody in the business knows, like, just like you're not going to roll up on Suge, you're not going to roll up on the Tommy Mottolas and anybody else. And it's always kind of been understood in the business on certain levels that cats who run these labels, they definitely have access, so to speak. They can come at you either way, either legally, they can talk to their politicians, local police department, et cetera, and handle you that way. Or if you get too far out of hand, they can have it done on the other thing. I think with the situation with Suge, it's just a lot more visible. Maybe he's not as good as camouflaging.
Puffy's just as visible as Suge, and Puffy wasn't. Puffy might be of a piece with Tommy Mottola or any of these guys, but Suge is of a different order.
Okay.
I think Suge's a much more sinister and dangerous person than Puffy is, or Tommy Mottola.
Well, I think one smiles and one frowns.
Well, hey.
Well, but Suge was hands-on. He'd get somebody in a room, urinate into a champagne flute and say, either tell me what I want or drink this. The other guys, if they wanted that done, they had somebody else do it.
Yeah, but again, that is one of the reasons we say the music business next to politics is probably one of America's most dirty businesses, meaning that a lot of gangsterism, and crime and all this other stuff goes on behind the scenes, and doesn't often come to light. But I mean, you 20 years in the business,
okay. Well, let me tell you that. Think of it though. Think of Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin had gotten whacked by the Italian mob in 1957.
Okay.
You really think that their murders would have been swept under the carpet the way Tupac's and Biggie's have? You think 5 years would have gone by? These guys are shot on public roads in the presence of dozens of witnesses, and we still can't make an arrest. I don't think that would have happened in an all.